Welcome. Psychology as a social skill. An introduction to the importance of psychology, Part 1. Psychology was created by studying people for the sole purpose of explaining their behavior and what causes it. It's designed for the people, by the people. Psychology serves one purpose only: to help people understand each other better. Unfortunately, psychology has been misunderstood for generations. It has become somewhat more popular in recent years, but even so, it fails to integrate itself into our lives. Maybe because it is viewed as a science rather than a social skill? First things first, what is science? The definition is pretty clear. It is gathered knowledge by studying the world through experiments and observations. When people think of the word science, they see someone in a white lab coat, surrounded by vials of colorful liquids and explosions, right? Probably so. That's the standard-ish image. Psychology does fall under the scientific umbrella, because it does gather knowledge based on observations and experiments. So, it doesn't seem unreasonable to think of psychology as a science. But that is exactly the main issue. Science sounds like something to be carefully studied. So, when thinking of psychology as a science, it does sound like something more difficult than it really is. Of course, there is such a thing called popular psychology, which can be an article in a magazine or a blog post. YouTube is filled with videos on psychology as well. The idea behind it is to simplify the understanding of psychology by making it fun, hip, and interesting. The problem with that, it kinda downgrades the understanding of psychology. People become skeptical of its validity, and an eye roll usually follows that. But what if we were to employ psychology in our everyday lives as a social skill? Now, the definition for social skills is relatively vague, but for the sake of the argument, think of things like taking out the trash or doing the dishes as a social skill. Those things are fairly easy to do, right? Exactly the point here. If we were to take psychology and turn it into that type of a social skill, then it wouldn't seem so difficult now, would it? Some of you might want to ask, why would you do that? What's the purpose here? Elementary, the purpose here is to make psychology into something simple and accessible that can help people build better relationships with one another by understanding each other better. After all, that is the essence of psychology. Isn't it because of misunderstandings and miscommunication that most of our daily problems stem from? The trick here is not to diminish the value of psychology, but rather to make it more user-friendly. By doing so, people would be able to implement psychology easier into their lives and benefit from it, without having to undergo years of studies. To be honest, psychology is not as difficult to figure out as some people might think. It's enough to apply basic principles of it to achieve satisfying results. No need for tricks and hacks. Everything falls down to wanting to put in the effort to understand. Once people can understand something, they are able to explain it better too, causing a ripple effect. Not convinced yet? Wait for it. Now then, every action the present has a reason the past. And every action the present has a reaction the future. Psychology helps to identify those factors. It helps to understand the action the present by locating and analyzing the reason the past. And based on that information, it determines the outcome, which is the reaction the future. Psychology is built to help people communicate with each other by understanding how the other person thinks. Once we get the basic idea for that, we can better understand where the person is coming from. And we can then better voice our own ideas, which will be understood the way they were intended to be in the first place. Minimizing the risk of being misunderstood. Thinking this sounds kinda like manipulation? Not at all. Manipulation, by its nature, is meant to be a one-way street, where only the user of it gains something. Psychology is not that. Psychology is a team effort. Even if one side uses it, that does not mean it will have the results intended, especially if the other side lacks the understanding of it. How can we save money on energy by turning all the lights off. If someone else keeps turning them back on, it's kind of the same way here. To be able to understand something, there are two ways to do it. One, learn it. Or two, be able to listen. Sometimes people are unable to understand something because they never experienced it personally. They understand knowledge the same as experience. Something like, if I can't see it, it does not exist. Or, what do you know about it if you've never done it? Sound familiar? Probably so. See, the beauty of psychology is that it does not require to live through something to be able to understand it. Through observation and analysis alone, psychology is able to listen and understand what kind of people are capable of it and which are not. Why is that, and how to tell them apart, can be found in the post, The Ugly Side of Psychology. What nobody said that psychology is all roses and rainbows. As brilliant as it is, it does have its cons too. The purpose of this blog is to keep things real. Addressing the dark side of the moon is part of it. Curious? This is only the beginning. You'll be able to see the power of psychology with each new post. You have reached the end of the post. Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for more, and remember, mental health is important too. Take care.
Welcome. Why Psychology Should Be a Religion. An Introduction to the Importance of Psychology, Part 2. Now then, religion in itself is a slightly complicated subject. Each time and land have some kind of a religion associated with it. There are peaceful religions and some more extreme ones. To each their own. This post is not about which religion is more superior or why. People are free to believe whatever they wish. But religion does have a safety feature, which, perhaps, is what makes it appealing to some still, even when living in the age of science and technology that we live in today. Considering the growth of evolution and civilization, it can seem rather outdated to keep believing in the story about one man creating our world in 7 days. But with progress comes change, and change can be a rather scary thing. It can be quite frightening to let go of things that one knows best, when one morning that knowledge and skill are announced as outdated. In this fast-paced world that is overflowing with challenges, religion can be a safe haven for some of us, because it stays the same. Most religions haven't changed much since their creation. It is that feature that makes them something stable, something familiar, something reliable. It is due to that sense of familiarity and unchangingness that some people choose to stay religious to this day. That is exactly why religion is so appealing. Even if here in Europe, for example, its roots are soaked in blood. But of course, even growing up in a religious household, some adults choose to stop being religious later in life simply because, as mentioned before, to each their own. There is no denying that the church has done some questionable things back in the day. Some of which these days could be trialed at the Hague Tribunal. Bear in mind that it was the church who sentenced Galileo Galilei for his findings of the earth rotating around the sun, instead of it being the other way round. Of course, the great man of science was spared his life. But it does not change the fact that it was religion that fought against his findings the most. And the church only did that because those findings meant change, and that change was frightening to some. The one good thing about religion were, and still are, the 10 Commandments. It was, probably, the first attempt to spread some guidelines, morals and values. The problem with it, though, was the method used to implement them. Religion's crucial flaw, back in the day, was that it relied too much on threats and fear to spread its teachings. Yet despite that, people devoted themselves to it without fail. Why? Because people fear the unknown. Change is something that is necessary to survive, but change is often scary, because it's not always possible to predict its outcome, and that is why some of us fear it. Out of all of the feelings and emotions, fear is the easiest to control. To a point. Everything has its limits, and so does fear. But more about that another time. Now then, let's circle back to psychology. It does not rely on anything besides the human intellect and analytical capacity. Successful use of psychology requires observation and analysis. It all starts with asking the right questions, and it ends with looking for the answers. Unlike the church back then, Psychology does not diminish the human intellect. Rather, it empowers it and encourages it. If religion tends to differ from country to country, or even within one country, making it sometimes rather difficult for people of different religions to understand each other, then psychology has the upper hand here. Psychology helps to look for differences and to understand them. It does not judge. It explains. Psychology nurtures human communication to the highest level. It is able to trace back ideas, actions and beliefs to their point of origin within a person or an entire culture, or even a country. With the help of its analysis, it is able to understand their reasoning. People often have trouble understanding one another, because they perceive the same things differently. Why is that? Different teachings and personal experiences cause people to focus on different beliefs and different aspects of the same topic. That is when quantity comes into play. When people are unable to understand each other's differences, the majority, who share the same understanding of something, regardless of it being correct or not, will be declared the right side, simply because there is more of them. Isn't that what happened to Mr. Galilei? Now, psychology does not rely on numbers to be right. Rather, it explains why the numbers believe to be right. Look at it this way: plenty of people know that smoking is bad for them, and yet plenty of them choose to smoke still. Even the reasons behind that are explained with the help of psychology. Now, back to the main point: why psychology should be a religion. Because if psychology was taught today, with the same level of devotion as religion used to be taught back in the day, within each household, then more people now would be able to understand each other better. You have reached the end of this post. Thanks for listening, stay tuned for more, and always remember, mental health is important. Take care.
Welcome. The Jazz of Psychology brings you to a dose of psychology and everyday life mix with a twist in the ugly side of psychology, the awakening. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Psychology can also be called the Matrix. Give it a moment and you'll see why. The thing with psychology is that it is like a double-edged sword. As many advantages as it has, it can also be slightly unsettling. Yes, it works for the benefit of the people. Yes, it is able to help us understand each other better. But, of course, there is a but. Psychology users are granted a superpower and are able to see the truth. Psychology sees through all of the facade that people put up through much effort. We're not talking about fake pictures on Instagram. We're talking about something deeper here. Each person has their background and their story. For someone who understands how psychology works and is able to use it, it becomes quite difficult to interact with people the same way as before. Once they are able to see everyone's problems clear as day, they become conflicted. Psychology does not truly give advice, because that is not what it does. Psychology is a guide. It gives people the knowledge and the understanding of how things work, leaving the decision-making completely in their hands. As mentioned before, psychology does not judge people, but it does categorize them. Anyone who has ever done any of the "see which type you are" tests knows that. Those types exist because people exist. Psychology was able to build that database of various types because it studied the variety of people to learn about those differences. Psychology uses an extensive range of terms to describe certain groups of people and certain mindsets. However, that is not the point of this post. But for the sake of the argument, there will be two categories used in this and future posts: a weak mindset and a strong mindset. Allow to elaborate. A weak mindset is the kind that is easily influenced by the masses, is immature, usually lacking in willpower and self-awareness. At times it displays a busy bee personality, with an activity-overflowing lifestyle, as quantity is valued above quality. As a result, this type has difficulty processing new information provided, because their brain is too busy trying to keep up with their packed physical activity. But more on that another time. On the other hand, a strong mindset is the kind of mindset that is able to observe, analyze, process, and adapt the information provided. A strong mindset is self-aware, emotionally mature, can be socially withdrawn at times, and lacking in physical activity, because quality is valued more than quantity. But more on that in later posts. Right now, let's circle back to why psychology has an ugly side too. That is the point of this post, after all. Once a person is able to see through others' facades, an internal conflict is born. Nobody likes a know-it-all. Because people with a weak mindset will understand feedback and analysis as well as insight, as in guidelines, and not advice as criticism. That is why psychology users will use this term instead of psychologists, because that is more accurate for the purpose of this blog. So, that is why psychology users withdraw themselves from certain social circles instead of attempting to share their knowledge and analysis. Most of the time, weak mindsets are unable to accept different opinions and believe that their actions, way of thinking, and beliefs are correct, just because. As a result, it becomes difficult to interact with them, as anything that is different can and will be, chances are, perceived as an attack, which is not the case at all. But again, more on that later in the series, the versus, the differences between. In order to avoid conflict, psychology users choose to remain silent, which does not always end well either. Because people have a need to know why they are being given the silent treatment, thus causing a different conflict. Sadly, there is no way out of this scot-free, unless the people in question are of a strong mindset. If that is the case, then there is hope to be heard and understood in the intended way. Of course, it's not exactly smooth sailing here either. But at least there is hope. A strong mindset will, at least, hear what the psychology user has to say before answering. Best case scenario, they will take some time to sleep on it. In the end, it all comes down to the ability to listen and understand. Psychology is a blessing and a curse. It can help, and yet, at the same time, it forces to see things that some of us hide so strongly or do not even realize about ourselves in the first place. It takes a strong mindset to be able to withstand the awakening within the matrix and to continue living in it, because once seen, it cannot be unseen. As mentioned before, psychology is a team effort. A person may not be a graduate of it, but to be able to use it well, they require to have a certain capacity within their operating system nonetheless. That is why psychology struggles to make its grand entrance into our lives the right way. You have reached the end of this post. Thank you for listening, and remember, mental health is important too. Take care.